Hi, everybody. It's Susan, and I've just come in to speak about this 29-degree conjunction between the Sun and Pluto. I would have wanted to do this a few days ago, but it's been quite the week. I have 29 degrees of Cancer rising, and this is right on my descendant, and um, it's been something. It's been quite the week. I tried to migrate my computer to a new laptop because my battery's been dying, and I lost all of my client data for some reason. I cannot find thousands, perhaps, of astrological files where I've been accumulating data on people and countries and clients over many, many years, and it's gone. So it's been intense for me. I'm building that back up slowly, but that's one of the reasons I wasn't able to just kind of sit down and do the presentations that I would have wanted to, because I do want to talk about this 29-degree to the 0-degree change. I've already done a video about that, and I posted that again in the community section of my channel. If you don't know me, I am a consulting astrologer, so I want to emphasize that I don't monetize my channel. I work by consultation. The reason that I don't, I was actually monetized the beginning of 2023, and I never, in fact, took the money because I didn't feel comfortable working for Google. It's not, I'm very strongly motivated by right livelihood, and I just don't want to take that money. And so I also don't want to be controlled in terms of what advertisers think is appropriate, and I have no control over who's advertising if I'm posting these things. So I just prefer to leave it at that and be paid for the actual work that I'm doing. So if you do want to support me, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. There's other ways of supporting me by taking an appointment, whatever way that you can. I am very grateful for that, but I do these things because I want to share this information, and also because it helps me to be known so that people know that I can do an appointment for them. Um, but anyway, just to say, that was my decision. And that was part of my 29-degree Capricorn dilemma, where I was really thinking, what am I doing in terms of income? I never took that money, even though it was accumulating on the Google YouTube account. And I just didn't ever feel comfortable with that. So here we are. I just present these videos. And that is also the reason why you don't see so many videos from me. Some people make their living exclusively by uploading videos to YouTube. And then, of course, that's what they devote their time to. But because I do such a lot of consultations, I just don't have the time or energy. And at the end of a day, after a few consultations with real human beings, the last thing I want to do is stare at my computer again. So here we are. Anyway, I do try and upload regularly, but it's certainly not as high volume as I would have wanted it to be. But okay, here we are. I think what I will do in the next few months is establish a community off of YouTube where we can come together and talk about astrology. I would really like that. I love the interaction with people, which is why I only do face-to-face consultations. I don't do recorded consultations. Thanks for your questions about that, but I don't do that. I'm working in a therapeutic way, so I want to see you. I want to talk to you. And in the same way, if we have a kind of a group coming together, we can talk about the astrology and understand how it might be affecting the world and affecting us individually. And so here we are. So let's pop this back up to exactly right now as I'm doing this. So it's approaching, the sun is approaching Pluto. The exact conjunction is in a couple of hours from now on the Saturday, the 20th of January. And this is, I'm here in Spain, so this is European time, but I've set it for your universal time. So that's adjusted for yourself. It will be in the afternoon in North and South America, and it will be already in the evening if you're in Asia, Australasia, and for my friends in New Zealand. Many of you actually, I have a higher than usual proportion of New Zealanders who come for appointments, and I'm absolutely gobsmacked at the time of day that they'll get up for an appointment. Same for you in California and in British Columbia. So well done for getting up at crazy times to have appointments with me. You don't have to, by the way, if you need to adjust for the time zone, be sure to send me an email and we'll find a better time. So don't think you have to wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning to get your appointment. There are ways to work in a more comfortable zone. Let's come right to the chart and have a look at what's going on as this is happening. So we have here, by the way, I work with the whole sign chart. That's including in my private consultations. I work with whole sign systems because I find it works better. I get much better results. I have a lot of clarity. The people that I work with get a lot of clarity. And I used to work with Placidus. That was how I learned. For many years, up until 2015, I was working with Placidus. And in 2015, I switched over to whole sign houses and I haven't looked back. So here we are. This is a whole sign house system. This is the ascendant only for the UK. So this is not necessarily the ascendant for your particular place. Don't worry too much about the house placements. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm more looking at the aspects between the planets. And so here we have, it just happens, as it happens, that, that we've got the Aquarius rising, which is pretty cool when you think about it. That's even more poignant, more potent at this time. So here we have the Sun and Pluto coming together. It will be an exact conjunction. This conjunction has been felt already for quite some time because of the build-up. It's already been this week, basically. The whole of this week has been very much connected to this Sun-Pluto conjunction. It's a very empowering buildup, especially as it's at the very last degree, the very last minute of the very last degree of Capricorn. That's known as the anaretic degree. So only the 29th, what is technically the 30th degree of a sign, is considered to be that anaretic degree, because it's really this point at which there's an accumulation of energy. And it's something that is deep power. It's really intense capacity for change, for influence. If you have these kinds of degrees in your chart, these are really important planets. These are perhaps related directly to other lives, other experiences that you will have brought information in from. And here we have the Sun and Pluto at that very last degree, and collectively this is a time where our foundations in the Capricorn way, in terms of governance, in terms of collective governance, in terms of responsibility and nurturance, questions around who cares for whom and who is responsible for whom, who takes responsibility for their actions, very Capricorn stuff. And we're seeing this played out in an absolutely extraordinary way. We have the moon in Taurus at the same time. So when earlier this week, the 18th, 19th, we had an exact conjunction of the moon and Jupiter, which is incredibly benefic, it's a wonderful thing. If you have that natally, moon Jupiter is wonderful, especially when the moon is exalted in Taurus. This is rather lovely. And what I see this as in terms of our global situation is that there's the coming of age, coming of realization of care and duty and our values in terms of the collective public, the people. The moon represents the people in a mundane chart. And this is coming to a place of the wisdom, this unbelievable movements now for change in terms of the genocide that's happening currently in Gaza. And this is something that I think is a game changer. I will be coming back to this because I'm fascinated about it myself. I'm interested in international politics. That's what it was previously my career. I studied it up to a master's degree, and I couldn't take the institutions. My relationship to Capricorn. I couldn't stand the hypocrisy and the ineffectiveness of these institutions. And so I was dying inside. I had to leave. And I wanted to work with people instead. And so here I am through a circuitous route. But this energy here of some combination of Pluto of Jupiter and the moon in Taurus, along with that Neptune, with Uranus, is actually very much about justice, wisdom, what is right, what are right values, right virtues, and changing this structure, changing all of that in a quite dramatic and radical way. So this, I think, we'll see very, very powerfully right up till May. When Jupiter shifts into Gemini, that will be a whole different thing. We will talk a lot about that. I just wanted to read, before we go into sort of how this could look for individuals, I just wanted to read a few of the things that have been happening at this 29-degree point this week. So these are just things that I skimmed off the top of what I've been noticing in the news. The one thing that really stands out for me, and I think this is an enormous theme that is certainly coming up for revision in the next couple of years, already this year very powerfully as Pluto moves into Aquarius, is that the United Nations is falling apart. Now, this, you don't need to be an astrologer to see that, but the UN system is dysfunctional, and it was already dysfunctional at its inception. That was almost by design, because it was designed by the former colonial powers when they were still colonies, and also by the so-called winners of the Second World War. It was no accident that the Americans were heavily involved in the construction of the UN, and they never wanted to give it teeth. They never wanted to give it power because they wanted to have that power themselves. I say America as Americans, as the government, not the people. So please, in the comments, don't tell me what a great person you are and that I'm talking trash about Americans. This is about the government. That's short form for the authorities of the country. So this is where we're going to see an enormous amount of information about UN institutions. Let me just give you a few of the things that are going on just this week, not even overall. So this is in the body of a text yesterday that was agreed upon by the 120-member non-aligned movement. Now, a lot of times you hear people talk about the third world. It's a really old-fashioned term, quite almost derogatory, and I prefer not to use that. So people often talk about developing countries, or the non-aligned movement is the preferred term by those who are in it. And what that means is, with reference to the Cold War era, so the reference was between people who were aligned to the Western European and sort of American influences, or the Eastern European and Russian slash USSR influences. And those who were not involved in either of those polarities were considered to be the third world. So the first world was the Westerners, second world was the Easterners, and the third world was everybody else. So we're talking now about the non-aligned movement, which is that. So you can maybe adopt that as a term rather than third world countries, which is really quite derogatory. So 120 member states. So in the UN, there's 196 member states. So we're talking about the majority of the world, and certainly in terms of population as well, because here that also includes countries like Indonesia and India and so on. So this is really huge. And although China is not a part of this movement, it is definitely subscribing to this ethos at this time. So in Kampala, in Uganda, this is where the meeting was held, and they demand a ceasefire. They've now, after this week's meeting on the 19th, which is now where the 29th degree became incredibly powerful with the sun merging with Pluto, which has a lot to do with leadership, governance, power and influence. Power plays Sun Pluto. If you have Sun Pluto natally, you're an incredibly powerful person, or you can find yourself kind of constantly involved in power plays with people until you take on your power. Depends, of course, which sign that's in. It wouldn't be in this particular sign because you would just be born today, so that we would have to talk to you in 20 years. But it would be in the sign that you're in that category. Like, let's say if it's Scorpio, there would be quite a lot of issues perhaps around your inner psychological nature, or some kind of hidden unconscious motivations, or even sexual motivations and influence of other scorpionic nature. So just so you can keep that in mind for yourself. But this is now with reference to political leadership. That's being blown out of the water right now. And we see that the text was said that because these UN reforms were on this agenda, as well as this demand for a ceasefire overtly and in no uncertain terms, which Western countries somehow are incapable of doing, which blows my mind. Unbelievable. They say that the war in Gaza has demonstrated the UN's inadequacy. We should establish a system. This is, by the way, this is Cyril Ramaphosa, who's the South African president, who's talking at this moment to the non-aligned states. This is in his speech. This is the text of that, but certainly followed by these countries. He says, we should establish a system of global governance that is fair and equitable and has the capacity to respond to the needs of all persons in situations of threat and harm. That seems so blatantly obvious, doesn't it? And originally that was kind of the purpose and meaning of the UN. But again, on the terms of the winners, who also established the sort of rules or the law that they choose when and how to abide by. So this is huge. I will come back to this because it's something that is fractioning the world order and it's flipping it on its head. I will also look at BRICS. It's another one of the charts that I lost. And I will look at how these things are changing. And this is something that I find quite interesting. Now, I know a lot of you don't, and that's fine, but I do recommend that you at least keep a little bit of attention on world events because they will affect you sooner or later. And we can't separate ourselves out from the things that are happening in the world. And you don't have to get down and dirty with the politics of it all, but you should be at least generally informed of what's happening outside of your country, so you can understand why certain things might happen. Like why, for example, when you travel on an American passport now, you won't be as welcome in many countries as you might have been in past years, and why that would be interesting for you to know. And so here we have another thing, which is that Davos. Davos is happening at this moment. It's almost comically aligned with this Pluto at the 29th degree of Capricorn, because Davos is really like I feel like I've said it before, but I feel like this 29-degree Capricorn, or the Pluto in Capricorn particularly, is really with reference to late stage capitalism. This whole third decan of Capricorn has shown us that. And certainly the Pluto in Capricorn has really destroyed all of that. And I will also be looking at charts. I'll just pull this one up right now, where we have what I consider to be the beginning of capitalism. This is the the British East Asia India Company. The Dutch East India Company was formed 2 years later. Maybe a year and a half later, but it's the Pluto is on the Mercury, which is it's right at the very almost at the 29th degree, so 28 and a half degrees of Capricorn. And Pluto has crossed that point over the last 2 years. And we're really seeing capitalism sort of dying a death, and also under a lot of pressure in terms of how people perceive it, where prior to this there was a kind of acceptation that this is the way it is. It's just like, yeah, well, this is the system we get, this is the one that works, this is of course how one rules the world, but it's no longer the case. And Pluto is in a very tight square, building to that square even more profoundly in 2024, and again in 2025 we'll feel that, to the Uranus, which is in the house of income, money, etc., in the British East India Company charter. And this charter is important because it's the first time ever that a company took over control of a country. And this is when Britain sort of swanned into India and said, hey ho, we'll take that, thanks, we'll have a chunk of this, please, and basically pillaged India for 200 years. To the tune of trillions of today's dollars. so here we have quite a lot of interest around this 2-degree Venus as well. The 2 degrees of Venus shows up in a number of different charts. I want to pull that up in other charts too, but I won't go into that here because there's just too many things to talk about. But we have, of course, Pluto crossing that Venus in the house of gains, that 11th house, the house of gains. And this is where I think we're going to start to see a real impact in terms of how this idea of what is a corporation, what is capitalism, it has to change. It's being completely transformed. So I won't go too deep into that right now because we're here for other things, but that's certainly something to pay attention to. So keep all of this in mind. So Davos, coming back to Davos, which is all about this ruled by capitalism, basically. It's a bunch of billionaires that get together and say, we have more money than you, so we just have these little hobbies that we want to engage in. And one of them is how to bring medications to people who don't want them and people who are under control of AI. Here's the other thing that we had this week that just blew me away, which is Mark Zuckerberg. I think it was just yesterday on Friday. Zuckerberg said he has pledged to build an advanced AI. Now, that's his new project. So this is, again, something that you really want to pay attention to in 2024. Everything that we look at this week, particularly all of January and into February, with this really intense area of the 29th degree of Capricorn and the 0 degree of Aquarius. This is going to be not only highlighted all of this year and into next year, but it's highlighted over 20 years. This is a kind of a stamp in our system, because don't forget that in December 2020, we had Jupiter and Saturn at the 0 degree point, starting what is called the grand conjunction, starting this new cycle of 20 years. And then we've got Pluto in there for 20 years. So we've got an overlap there of at least 16, 17 years of intensity around a whole new way of showing up in the world. And the other thing that was about this, related to AI, but also related to control, is that there's this big push in Davos around disease X. So related to the last 3 or 4 years very intensively. And so look out for this new pandemic that we're somehow guaranteed, this mystery disease that everyone is preparing for. And in the same breath as they're preparing for this mystery pandemic, disease X, they're also really clamping down on freedom of speech. Now, everybody has to remember that Aquarius represents the intellect. It's a very intellectual sign. It's not so touchy-feely. It's more thinky and experimental and thinking beyond today, thinking out of the box. Inventiveness, for example, science is Aquarian. And so where Pluto moves into Aquarius, we're going to have quite a lot of things that are dehumanizing in so many different ways. And we need to then work harder to maintain our humanity. And I'll speak a lot about that when I talk about the full moon that's coming up this week. There's a Leo full moon, which is really, I think, very symbolic of this whole shift that we're in. And I'll speak to that, and I'll do that tomorrow, so on Sunday, the 21st of January. But this is something to watch out for, because there is this whole push about what is disinformation. They even invented a new word that's very Aquarian. Disinformation is actual true information. It's the truth, but it's being suppressed because it's inconvenient to those in power. It's like, yeah, but please don't share those facts because we don't want people to doubt us. So it's really cagey. It's not misinformation, which means that you're trying to misguide somebody, which is actually what you could describe government propaganda as, but it's disinformation. So it's not even untrue. It's just that they don't want you to talk about certain things. And so this is something to be aware of, because I follow a brilliant doctor called Meryl Nass, and Nass. Look for Meryl on Substack. She's amazing, along with Robert Malone and other important voices in terms of helping us see where things are shifting medically, but also politically in terms of our freedoms and our freedom of choice over what happens to our bodies. And Meryl just this morning posted that they've determined that at least 3 UN agencies are trying to control free speech. This is this 29th degree of Capricorn going into the first degree of Aquarius. And so she's identified UNESCO, the WHO, and the UN itself, which is talking about this disinformation. The WHO, of course, is with regards to our capacity to choose how we treat our bodies if there's an illness, and also what to do in the context of an illness, which will soon in May be determined. All members of the WHO will have to agree to follow the WHO's determination of what to do in the event of this pandemic that they're selling really hard right now with disease X. They did such a horrible job over the last period of the pandemic, and they haven't questioned any of that. In fact, they're doubling down, despite the fact that all of these measures have been shown to be far more harsh and actually counterproductive, to say the least, if not outright destructive to our psychology, at the very least, our social fabric and our overall health. And UNESCO was something I didn't look into, so I don't know exactly what she's referring to there. I didn't have time to read that, but it's UNESCO is also clamping down on what we can say. So it's really very, very important for you to keep paying attention in these next couple of years to your very gradual erosion of freedoms, because this is where you think it's about somebody else until it's about you. There's an American journalist, Gonzalo Lira, who was murdered by Ukraine, imprisoned wrongly, according to any right-thinking person. Ukraine, of course, not a democracy, but sold as such to generate this sympathy for war. And Ukraine basically threw him in jail for talking about what was really going on in Ukraine during the war. And he died last week. So another very profound indicator of this Pluto last degree of Capricorn, where we're seeing that freedom of speech is openly trampled on, and the United States did absolutely nothing for this US citizen who was wrongly imprisoned and then died for not being treated for pneumonia while in prison. So 29 degrees Capricorn, I think another way you could say that is don't trust your government, and I don't think we ever could, but especially now, they don't even care to what extent this kind of information gets out. This week as well, there was a lot of exposure, and this month in general, a lot of exposure about how the FBI and the government already had information in 2019 about Hunter Biden's laptop, about the fact that it was real. And yet the FBI contacted social media outlets to say, this is Russian disinformation. So again, now we're looking at things in 29 Capricorn, looking at things that are undermining government, undermining government. And especially when Pluto goes into Aquarius, it starts to become more of this totalitarian flavor. So when the government that you think is ruling you is not where the power lies, that is where we enter into totalitarianism. And so this is where, for example, the last 15 years of Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn, have shown us where what we consider to be government or democracy has been an absolute fabrication. And we're just seeing that in spades right now at this very last degree. Just also yesterday, both the European Parliament in Brussels and the Canadian Parliament in Ottawa voted not to make COVID vaccine contracts public. And so the way that taxpayers' money was spent and how those contracts were negotiated is not your business. So never mind. why should that matter to the taxpayer? So that's again this Pluto 29 degrees, especially as the sun approaches that, it's just out in the open. The sun is exposing all of that out in the open. But that was the middle of January, but still 29 degrees Pluto, where an Austrian heiress vowed, she was 31 years old, so I guess millennial. She is, and this is a very Aquarian energy. It's a very sort of last degree of Capricorn going into the first degree of Aquarius, decides to give away 25 million euros of her inheritance. And she's also asked 50 people to help her distribute it to worthy causes. And so I couldn't think of anything more end of Capricorn, beginning of Aquarius, this transformation, this incredible Plutonian idea of shift of perspective. This is perhaps one of the stories that best describes it. So giving away your inheritance, seeing that that's a good thing for society, and changing, flipping this on its head, this notion of inherited wealth and power. Flipping it on its head. Another thing that happened just yesterday, so 19th of January, is that finally, after not really communicating directly, Joe Biden, President of the United States, spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the Prime Minister of Israel, and basically had conflicting views. This is also, for me, another end of story kind of thing, where we see, and I'll talk about Israel in another thing, because their country is being completely reconfigured by this past year, and Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn is part of that story, and the early degrees, of course, of Aquarius. And so here we have a flipping on its head of the narrative that the United States has any kind of control over what happens in Israel, which was always the perception, but we see the very opposite is true. And so there is a self-destruction that's happening in that relationship. Again, I'll go into that in another space. And then I just wanted to check, I think there was one more story that I wanted to share with you, because these are really, there's a couple more, yeah. These are really illustrative of these degree points, this very, very intense ending of something, very, very big shift that's happening here. So Indonesia and Slovenia have both added their voices very powerfully to a case that was brought already in December 2022 against Israel at the ICJ. So that's the second case. There's the genocide case that South Africa brought, which was 2 weeks ago at Pluto at 29 degrees of Capricorn. And now Slovenia has joined Indonesia in this case. And the case is actually asking for an advisory opinion on whether Israeli policies against Palestinians violated international law. And so that should also be made apparent soon. That should be coming in the weeks ahead, if not the months ahead. But I think these are accelerated. This is accelerated because of the ongoing genocide. So 24,000 people have been killed without assessing how many people are missing. So this is at the point that I'm giving this talk here. I mentioned Davos. That's a classic. Boeing. This is another one. 29 degrees Capricorn, sun on Capricorn. The image of a country, image of a company, corporation, in self-destruct mode, where basically we're looking at a situation of negligence, greed, and mismanagement, which is destroying a company that actually was very successful for many decades. And so Boeing has had a couple of incidents just this week, which reflect badly on their structure. And again, they have made incredible profits over many years, but their product is getting worse and worse. So Fujitsu, same thing. That's a computer systems and software systems company that is in the media in the United Kingdom. I'll let you follow up on that because it was actually due to a television series that, or maybe a Netflix series that exposed that in fact it was the corporations' negligence. This is spanning many years between like 1999 and 2015, where because of computer failings, because of systems and software failings, many postmasters in the UK were charged with fraud or negligence or embezzlement and all kinds of things. Some of them killed themselves, some of them were imprisoned, many of them were charged at the very least, their reputations tarnished because of software failings that the company knew about already 15 years ago. In the early part, so basically when Pluto entered into Capricorn, but even it was known about while Pluto was still in Sagittarius. So this is coming out in the open now. Things are starting to be exposed. 29 Pluto is exposing all of this ugly undoing of faith and integrity and trust in public office, in governance, in companies, and so on. And bear this in mind. These are not random, this is not sort of random gossip. I say this because since AI and technology is becoming really integrated in our everyday life, and it will be all the more so while Pluto is in Aquarius, we need to be aware that these technological failings will happen again. Such types of errors will happen again, and we have to always keep in mind what is real, what is being manipulated, what is the truth behind these things, because Pluto in Aquarius will also have us being pitted against each other. This is something I'll talk about again, but be careful that we're being played, and we're being anything that provokes this feeling of separation, superiority, difference, fear. That's the Pluto word, is fear. And that is designed to separate us. It's designed to divide and conquer. That is literally the sort of way of colonizers. So this is the 29th degree. I think with especially the sun highlighting this right now in these days, is really about the destruction of colonization as well as the destruction of colonies and the end of the colonial system. And I think Gaza is, alas, paying a very, very high price to be the kind of flashpoint that draws everyone's attention to how ugly colonialism is and how it has been ugly for 500 years, since its inception, especially in the Western-dominated colonial sense. And this is like the last kind of outpost, colonial outpost, where we're really having now a very ugly visual of what colonialism always was. Another colonial reference here this week is, again, just on Friday, France and Germany announced that they are creating a 3-year, 2.1 million euro fund, which will prioritize their former colonies of both countries, and which could lead to the return of artifacts and what are considered objects of cultural interest, in Europe often considered art. So that would go, especially in terms of Africa. So there's no mention of other regions, but certainly with regards to their African colonies. And so they're going to research the provenance. That means how did they acquire those things? And one day, maybe Britain will do the same. The British Museum certainly holds a lot of things that many cultures consider to have been pillaged, and it will not relinquish them, but that has to change at some point. Let's come to the chart again. So after this little interlude about our global situation, which I emphasize, I think is really important to understand. We don't have to obsess about it, but we need to see what's going on. Let's have a look at this very intense moment. Keep pulling it up right to this moment. as the sun builds up to Pluto. We have a conjunction building between Mercury and Mars. So Mars is incredibly powerful in Capricorn. Mercury is very rational, again, very, very committed, very serious when it's in Capricorn. And Mercury especially is in a very favorable trine to Jupiter. So there's a lot of clear-headed thinking. There's a lot of potential for understanding and wisdom. Now it's actually in a separating trine. The trine happened earlier this week, a couple of days ago. And Mars, of course, was trining Jupiter earlier this week, actually 2 weeks ago, but 10 days ago. But that's still in orb, still a separating orb. But by tomorrow, Sunday, Monday, it will be no longer in orb. But that's very uplifting in the sense of feeling a new sense of possibility, a new sense of awareness. Mercury trining Jupiter is high-minded thinking. It's grounded. It's in an earth sign, and very, very helpful. And again, we saw that trine between the sun and Pluto and the moon in Taurus. So again, it emphasizes this feeling of values. What are my values? What is this that I believe? What do I put my trust in? What do I believe in? We do have well, there's again a separating square between Venus and Neptune, still very strong though. And that Venus-Neptune can be compassion. It's high-minded, both ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is ruled by Venus, so they're still in mutual reception for another couple of days. And that is very strongly with regards to also what we believe, what we feel is important. Venus-Neptune, however, can also be a wee bit of this kind of pie in the sky thinking, can be a little over optimistic. That can apply to AI, it can apply to our global situation, it can apply to political situations. Just pick and choose whatever you want to, and realize where there's some ways of thinking that are simply not realistic. It's the way things are at this moment, and also being careful not to be duped, because Venus squaring Neptune is also potentially with reference, because that Jupiter is currently in Taurus, with reference to money. And that is where we see also this week, I forgot to mention that one, CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies are spoken about more and more and more. There's several countries that are adopting that in a way that becomes something that may be unavoidable in some countries, where it's very difficult then to have autonomy around how you spend your money, what you're doing with your money. We still have a very helpful sextile between Saturn and Jupiter, and that's all through January and February. So really good for rational thinking and support around establishing something that can be, again, healthy and high-minded. So again, that depends where that is in your chart. I've done videos about these different things, so you can find things around Saturn, for example. And through the last couple of weeks, I've done this Saturn and Jupiter trine in regards to the lunations. And then, of course, we also have a trine from Mercury to Saturn, which adds to this healthy-minded approach to things, a way of seeing things that is clarifying, a way of seeing things that can be rational, that can be long-lasting. Now, again, that depends on what it is that you're looking at. It can be that the long-lasting quality is what is decided in Davos, and it can be what is decided in the confines of your own mind. So the 29-degree point of Capricorn for each individual, I've spoken about through the video that I posted yesterday, I think, on the community channel, which talks about that 29th degree again. But in terms of your personal experience, it also will call in the very beginning of Capricorn in a way that is very crystallizing, that asks you to go back to the end of 2007 and the beginning of 2008, where this very beginning point of Capricorn was emphasized in your chart, and where you, whatever was going on, and it doesn't, you don't even need to know where that was happening in your chart. Just look at what was going on in your life at the end of 2007, beginning of 2008. We know collectively what was happening in terms of the economy and in terms of, again, deception around governance and deception around banking and so on. That is what is being crystallized at this point. And so you can really start to play around with your own personal experience and see where you might be pressed to really sacrifice or let go something at this point, where you realize, I've tried my best, I did the thing, I realized this is no longer that. This might be about a job, it might be about a relationship, it might be about how you manage your money. It's something that you have felt you've had to adjust to over the last 15 years, and now you're really letting go of this. You're really moving into what we could describe as a new era collectively, but certainly personally as well. All the more so if you have 29 degrees of, I would say, of almost anything in the chart. I do find that semi-sextiles and inconjuncts are as powerful as the oppositions and so on. I mean, they will affect you differently, but the 29th degree of anything in your chart will be emphasized by this, especially as Pluto is so powerful and slow moving. You can look at this in terms of last year, beginning of 2023, and the end of 2023 and beginning of 2024. So all of January, essentially. And know that your life is changing. Something big is happening here. I will come back and talk about the Leo moon at 5 degrees. It's building up to something intense, and I'm going to speak about that more in terms of our personal lives and go sign by sign there. But thanks for listening this far. If you got this far, well done. I'd love to hear your comments about what you've noticed in the news, what you're seeing about this 29th degree and how that seems to be showing up. And I will see you tomorrow in the video for the Leo full moon. So lots of love to all of you. Good luck with all of these transformations, and I'll see you very soon.